dear listeners, to the WIP show brought to you by Kimaya Creatives, where we dive deep into the world of writing and creativity. I am Namrata, your host and the founder of Kimaya Creatives. WIP, you might ask, well, it stands for Writing in Progress, and that's exactly what we are about here. Each week, we bring you inspiring conversations with talented writers, delving into their journeys, their challenges, and the story behind their stories. From seasoned authors to aspiring wordsmiths, we explore the nooks and crannies of the writing process. Whether it's overcoming writer's block, finding inspiration in the unlikeliest of places, or simply navigating the wild, wonderful world of words, we are here for it all. So grab your favorite writing mug, settle into your coziest writing nook, and join us as we celebrate the beauty and chaos of the writing life. Our guest today is author, poet, and a very dear friend, Abhishek Anicca. Abhishek is a writer, poet, and a performer. He identifies as a person with disability and chronic illness. Abhishek did his graduation from Delhi University and master's from TIS, Mumbai, and an MPhil degree in Women and Gender Studies from Ambedkar University. He is a researcher who works on disability and gender, especially on the relationship between disability, masculinity, and sexuality. He is also the founder of Dislang, an online magazine that publishes narratives by disabled and chronically ill people. He has written columns and other nonfiction pieces for different publications over the years. His work has appeared in the Times of India, Outlook, India Spent, Unbias, The News, the Quint, DNA India, Devex, Marine Asia Pacific, Kitaab, The Third Eye, DailyO, Money Control, Agents of Ishq, News 9 Live, Tarshi, among others. His poetry in English and Hindi has appeared in Nether Quarterly, the Alipur Post, Gulmohar Quarterly, the Sunflower Collective, Prabhat Khabar, Poshamba, Samalochan, Apni Mati, Janki Pul, India Cultural Forum, Women's Web, among others. He has performed in Spiel Art Theatre Festival, Reframe Festival, LSD India, Nipman Awards, and others. His first book in English is a collection of memoir essays about living with disability and chronic illness, The Grammar of My Body, published by Penguin Random House India in late 2023. I have admired Abhishek's work for long, and we've been wanting to have this conversation for a while now. And I'm so glad we are doing this today. Welcome, Abhishek, to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Namita, for calling me.
So,
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. To start the discussion, can you share more about your personal journey and how your experiences with locomotor disability and chronic illness have influenced your writing and creative endeavors?
Yeah, I think they are a huge force in why I write, because I think around 2011-12 is when my impairments began to deteriorate and my body started falling apart. And I had nowhere to go and I was very lonely and depressed. So I started writing. And writing for me was a gateway out of, just loneliness and depression. So I wrote a lot of poems. I wrote Hindi poems to begin with, and wrote a lot of them. Most of them not good enough, but doesn't matter when you are writing just to heal. And I tried to write a novel, around 6-7 drafts of a novel. I wrote it from third person perspective, then a first person thing. It went on. It was an experiment, but it was also something I wanted to just went out. It was dystopian fiction. But it was an exercise in learning how to write, because I wasn't a very good writer till college or TIS. I was decent at writing Hindi poems, but when it came to writing in English, I was still learning how to write. I was reading a lot, so that helped. But I was still learning how to write. In fact, back in college, I remember someone telling me, stick to Hindi. Why are you writing in English? Which was a comment not taken well, but I understand that people like me who come from, even in our school, it was supposedly an English medium school, but we seldom talked in English. Everyone, and I was a Hindi debater, so there was no obligation for me to be good in English. I was good in CBSE English, is it's the very low bar of English, so you don't actually read anything. But I was reading. I think I read like people gifted me. There were some culturally enriched relatives who gifted me Wuthering Heights and books like these, which I never read, but at least I had them, so I can claim that it had some influence. But I knew about the titles. Um, it was only later that I read Jane Austen. Yeah, it's all a process, and I think the first series of books which I read were Harry Potter, as did many of the people growing up in late 90s, 2000s. I caught up late, but yeah, it helped. You know, it just reading helped a lot. But yeah, during the 2011-12 phase, I started writing, and uh, I was ill a lot of times, and so writing was a way out for me. And but started taking writing seriously only because when I was so ill that I couldn't work. So it was almost out of desperation because I I was doing a field job and I knew how hard it was for my body to keep doing these jobs. And also I was not getting many jobs even if I wanted to do them. I was not being hired because of my disability. That happens actively without explicitly people telling you that you are disabled, we can't take you, they will not take you. So that happened a lot. So after that, started writing professionally, writing columns, most of them unpaid in the beginning. I wrote around 30, 40 columns for free, which happens in India. And but it also like was an exercise in knowing how to write an 800 word piece, for a column. Now I write, when I'm commissioned, I write 800 words in an hour or two. And, I have very, that's my writing process, very organic in that sense. I don't take up work which is, I don't take up much field related pieces anyways. I don't get them anyways. Again, I think there is a bias which is in the
Hmm.
system. But yeah, I think I mostly write. I wrote a lot of poems when I was between 2016 to uh, 2023. I was ill at least 4 to 5 times. I had major illnesses. And when you have a major illness, you are in a hospital, and then you take 2 to 3 months to recover. And during that recovery, I think poetry was the only thing I held on to as a way of saying ki there is life left in me. So I wrote a lot of poems. I uh, I, I was critically ill during COVID in ICU, and it took me almost 6 months to recover. Despite long COVID, long-term COVID took almost a year, but it, even basic recovery took almost 4 to 5 months. So during that time, I just wrote. In fact, most of the pieces in the book were written in the period where I was recovering at my parents' place in Darbhanga. I was just writing pieces because that was the only thing to hold on to. Because you don't have, when you are ill, you don't have much to hold on to, and especially when you are recovering, despite all your hopefulness, life won't be same again, and your body is deteriorating. So your physicality changes. The idea of how you spend life changes. So when that with that everything changes, and all your you have to refresh your dreams in ways. And I think writing helps a lot with that because it also helps you to understand where you are in life, because it is sometimes very difficult to actually pontificate on it or tell yourself ki, dude, you will never be able to do this thing again. You won't be able to live this kind of life again. So, and I think poetry is a good way to tell you that without telling you that. Poetry or even any kind of writing, I think it's a good way to actually say a lot of truths which you can't tell yourself directly.
Yeah.
So yeah, writing became completely, I think, if I wasn't disabled and chronically ill, I don't think I would have taken writing as seriously. I would have still wanted to be a Hindi poet, as there are many Hindi poets in our country who write, you know, as a passion project. But yeah, it made me appreciate the idea of writing, the idea of the organic nature of the process of writing more than the what you produce. Even if it's not good, the idea, think about ideating and putting yourself out there, expressing things, assessing your emotions. It's a very therapeutic process. It's not therapy, but it's therapeutic process. And if you can make sense of the process, if you understand the process, you grow as an individual. So I think that ways, I think writing or any form of art it's a beautiful process. The process is beautiful. And when people said it, when famous artists said it, you often said, "Are what process and all," because they are famous now. That's why they're saying. But when you actually start writing and writing a lot, one of the things I often tell people who come to me and say, writing and all of that advice, which I'm not the best person to give. I'm not the best person to give advice, but I often tell them write a lot, because I think writing a lot will also make it clear what you want to write, how you want to write. Uh, just writing a lot, even if you write, most of the poets who came before us also wrote terrible poems. You don't read it because you only read assorted collections, and uh, you know Emily Dickinson wrote a lot of shitty poems, which are three-line poems. Not shitty poems, they're great poems, I think, but literary, craft-wise speaking. And I often have long rants about craft, because I think most people what they think of it as craft
Yeah,
is basically what they are used to consuming.
true.
So what it's a formulaic poem, it's a repetitive poem, it's a daily news event poem. These work very well because people are used to, right now there is a terrible thing happened in our country, and I want to also, that's the most acceptable form, is to write a poem about it, or to refresh one of your older poems about gender and push it as, that you are a very. But I also know this now from experience, that kind of expression is very performative. It's I can do it, most people do it, most poets do it, but let me stop and not perform. Let the Dalits write about Dalit poetry. Let me women write about gender poetry. Let trans people, queer people write about their poetry. I can't, empathy, solidarity is a good thing, but I don't want to. If I'm not writing fiction, I don't want to, speak for them, or try to, say that, that I am the most, because it's a very performative thing. As a disabled person, you know this very well.
Yeah,
Understand this, that everyone is trying to perform that idea that they actually understand, but they don't. And I think it's good to be honest that you don't understand a lot of things which happen. You don't understand the systematic generational discrimination which a lot of people have suffered in this country. So you don't take that space. You respect that space, their space. So yeah, that's the. I think that earlier I used to write about everything. So that also evolves once you are constantly writing, because you are also, your politics is also develops. You are listening to what you are writing, and you are realizing how you are just also performing because certain audience will like it. And after the point when you discover your voice, then you realize how shallow the entire process is, even if it is very validating, rewarding. If I wrote a topical poem every day, I would be much more popular than I am writing my own stuff. That is the truth. But that is a demarcation which a writer or an artist makes. You know? And it only happens when you have discovered your voice. And I think disability and illness helped me a lot to find that voice.
very well articulated, I must say, because I also believe that, writing, you start listening to what you're writing, but you also start listening to what your heart and your mind are, talking or thinking, because it gives you that quiet that is needed from all the opinions that you're surrounded by, and suddenly your
Yeah.
voice is there, clear. And that I think
Yeah.
it's an important aspect of a writer. So Abhishek, you write in both English and Hindi. So how does your bilingual shape your creative process and the themes you explore in your work?
I think now it's because I write so much in English, it's much more dominated by that voice. Hindi used to be very organic, uh, and I think I could have written Hindi prose also. But the thing is, I might in some like at some stage in life. But you are reading less of Hindi, then it becomes difficult to actually write in Hindi. First of all, you have to read anything. The language you are reading it, you have to read the language to write the language. That is something I believe in. But it's also I got very demoralized by Hindi, the whole publishing world, and not by Hindi language, but whole the publishing world and politics around it. Got very tiring because there is too much. I was writing good poems, and so I went to a few publishers, and they told me go to this famous person and show him your poems. If they like it, then we will think about it. It was very heartbreaking for me because what is the sense of that? That doesn't make sense. Uh, but that's how the Hindi world, anyways. Everyone was gatekeeping. So, but it was also to do with just. I think there was no vocabulary for a lot of things in which I wanted to write about in Hindi. So there was no vocabulary developed for disability, chronic illness. When I write in Hindi, have to write bar bar hone wali bimari, which doesn't make sense actually. It doesn't in any way condense our experience of living with chronic illness. So yeah, I think that also affected it a lot. But I also think there, there are two separate worlds, and in any word, if you're writing in Hindi, you have to appease certain ecosystem, belong to certain ecosystem, attend events, write reviews for other authors. Uh, that happens a lot. I think English is more evolved also because it is a bigger market. So a lot of things you don't have to do, but again, a lot of opportunities I got uh, and I still get is because I have said something, written something. I gave an interview and I mentioned some films, so I got that change turned into a piece. So that happens a lot, even in English ecosystem, but it's less of a I have to know people personally to get published, which happens a lot in Hindi. Um, and just I don't think there is a space for. There was one Hindi book published by Westland written by this YouTuber who wrote about polio, and very interesting book, but again very plainly written, but interesting book. It was translated vitamins and ghee. So that book I had read, so it was an interesting thing. But also I think I want to reading culture in Hindi is dying. Very few people are actually reading new things. A lot of fascination with There's a lot of fascination with poetry, but it's all very it's also very video oriented. Poetry went video oriented, and I was part of the spoken word scene, so I understood this very well. That in the 2010s, I think, uh, poetry became a visual medium with Instagram and everything, and now it has completely become a visual medium. Every poet of has an Instagram channel where he puts out his poetry. No one is reading poetry. So yeah, and that I think always has, as a disabled person, as a person who has doubts about how visually he wants to put himself out. I mean, most of the times I don't even have the luxury of putting out a camera. I don't want to, in any sense, I don't want to sell my life and mix poetry with it. That doesn't work with me. I think I would rather write about my life than just. And there's an urge to do that because as any artist, you want a bigger audience, bigger readership. But I think we have reached a point where that those two are completely different worlds. Uh, there is no, if you have readers, there are no. It's not that if if you're a very good, if you make a very good video of your poem, then people will go and buy your poetry book and read it. So I think I continue to write both. I will continue to write. Also, I will continue to write in Hindi only if I'm commissioned and paid for it. I'm a writer professionally, so that becomes a big thing. If you are not given opportunities, you can't write on Facebook every day. That I can't do. That is the most painful thing see writers doing, which is to write for Facebook. And of course, you get a lot of followership, but that doesn't turn organically into how many people will buy your book. So that is a process I have observed the process for a long time, and I came to the conclusion that I was anyways comfortable with the language, the vocabulary which English offered me. But yeah, Hindi is always something I can go back to, but it will be again, it should be very organic, and it should be very. I have to tell that like if I'm dying to tell that thing, tell that story, a poem, then only I think I will resort to Hindi. Otherwise, I think I'm because it's very difficult. Believe it's not. I see a lot of famous authors. I read about people going to Italy or France and then writing in French and French and Italian, and then their books becoming, you know, even if they are not, we assume that their books are big now in those countries. That's how we perceive the world. But the only books which have Hindi books which have become big in India are books which have been translated and have either won a prize or you know um, or are like
Yeah.
any other language also, like most of the books which are really have a readership are books which are translated to English. So yeah, I think English is the way to go for me, because I think I want to belong somewhere. I think I've spent my whole life trying to belong somewhere, and it's very difficult with disability and chronic illness. It's very difficult to belong in these circles because
Yeah.
it's just a lot of physical thing. Yeah, you have to just going to events and going to all of these things and just even Patna is a good Hindi literary scene, but there's so many events you have to go to and you have to think so many things about the gaze, how will you go, whether it's accessible or not, and then people are not even interesting enough. And so even if you talk about your experiences, if you get pity in return, you don't want to talk about them.
Yeah. I completely agree.
So that crowd also, that readership also has not evolved enough. So maybe a time will come, then definitely why not? But for now, it's completely. I'm an English language writer, a very Indian English language writer. My English is very Indian and it will always be very Indian. Uh, and now it's very acceptable also. It's not that it's not acceptable Indian English. But since I have no fancy degrees, I have not been abroad. I don't even. I just got my passport made. It's a very funny thing because other people, they often presume that I'm very well traveled because I have some friends who are, who are American or British. Or, like I have a lot of friends who are. But when I tell them that the most diverse group of friends I made was in Patna, where I live now, because of some development sector work. But that's the funny part that people assume. So I'm part of some mentorship where it's South Asian. So suddenly I became from an Indian, I became South Asian. So it was a very revealing moment for me. Finally, I'm South Asian, and then otherwise I have not even traveled outside. So how are you South Asian? So I think that is a funny process which you realize, and I have a lot of friends who live abroad. Okay.
Okay.
And most people from this, they go to
Yeah.
US, UK. I couldn't go because of my disability. I won't lie that I am some patriotic. Like I gave my GRE twice. I wanted to do a PhD, but my health never allowed me to go abroad. But But the funny part is always like, how you project. And these are the people who actually are often surprised, because this is a person who actually never went out, doesn't have these fancy degrees, and still has made it according to them as a writer. And they are like, it's completely. But that's the meta narrative we all build, about writing. I think there's such a in the English world also, like English language writing world, there is this fascination for everything which you have, and any artistic field. Yeah, I also, like, in my bio you mentioned spiel art, because it's German and it's fancy, sounds fancier, and it was done. The performance was done from Darbhanga, my hometown, because it was COVID era and everything was digital, and that's probably why I got the opportunity also. Otherwise, I might not have gone to Germany, because I hate winters. I can't go in October. Like, disabled people have
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many things. They're always friends were telling me, why don't you come abroad, do a PhD, do whatever. I said, and I often said, if I could get through the winter in India, that's my first objective, to survive winters in India, because winters are very harsh for disabled, like people who have physical impairment, especially like people who have any kind of paralysis. It's very difficult, since my legs are partially paralyzed. It becomes very difficult anyways to just bear the winter. So a lot of cities I don't want to go to. And it's also like, they don't understand the burden of being physical burden of being disabled. And the burden is on yourself. Like, that's a huge thing. When I'm ill, I was recently ill and I was not able to even walk from my room to the other room. And I can't imagine myself putting myself in a situation some thousands of kilometers away, where I can't walk and I have no one to help me. There was no one to help me here also, but within, if I want to, I can at least call people, and that's a very, comforting thing. So, because of course people who are undisabled will never realize this, how difficult it is to actually, you know this even this independence which you somehow buy from the society and say, no, I will live independently. It's very difficult, because that any crisis, whenever any crisis happens, and you go out in the world, and the world will say, Ki, why do you live alone? Why don't you live with your parents? Why don't you live this and that? So it's very difficult to preserve your self-respect and be on your own. But more or less, I think, I think English is the way forward for me, because I think, um, I don't want to distract myself from the idea of writing many books. If I'm alive for 20 years, I want to write 4 or 5 books. I want to explore different genres. I want to write in different voices. I want to experiment with it, fail, but I want to do that. I think I have the creativity to do that. I don't know if I will be able to sell books, but that's a different thing. But yeah, I would like to write books, write many more books, and in a focused way, because anyways I like uh, I have too many existential crises to, sometimes. So I think I should just focus on something, and so being an English language writer is what I want to focus on.
Right. So I got a very interesting point that you made, that Hindi books or any other language apart from English come into foray when they win an award or they are translated or something. What are your thoughts about them being featured in movies, or movies like this Firai Haseen Dilruba, trying to put light on Dinesh Pandit and the local Hindi novels, or the pulp fiction that was popular at one point of time in the 80s and 90s? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that can help revive this reading habit of going back to those authors, or even anybody in Hindi for that matter, or that language? Do you think it'll actually help that way?
I'm an actor also, so I believe that the only reason this is relevant, because Hindi cinema lacks original storytellers, and they will do anything to save their asses, and that's why they are borrowing it from. They might even make a series from all those detective pulp fiction novels. It's like, it's so passe because if you want to know the pulp fiction which is being made today, there's a lot of it on places like, you compare something to which comes on Netflix, which is mainstream, to something which comes on Ullu, which is the Ekta Kapoor run mainstream, which is really pulpy, and which is actually which might have a larger viewership than Hasin Dilruba will ever have, because it's cheaper and more accessible. And so what they are doing is actually turning pulp into mainstream, which they're doing because they lack. What was pulp then is not now pulp now.
Yeah.
The world has changed due to internet. But yeah, they will borrow stories because they don't value good writers. So Bollywood would continue to make. But again, most of the Hindi popular fiction, if you see, popular fiction, I'm not talking about very good fiction which is now being translated and rewarded. But popular fiction these days is all about engineering, IIT, love story, and it can work. It's not that it can't work, but it's so monotonous. Like so, it's actually I understand them because if I would not have been disabled, I would have written a similar love story only because that is the kind of thing. If you come from the Hindi art, the idea that moves you most and grew up in a certain generation is the idea of love and a love story because sometimes most of the people who went to these engineering institutions went to good schools where you're isolated from ideas of caste, class, and gender. They have a very particular world kind of thinking.
Yeah.
So it is a different world. I think I don't take uh, Bollywood seriously. But I take it seriously if I'm making film with them. Like if I'm
You
acting in a
actually
film.
remind me of what Anurag Kashyap said that, that filmmakers like the Karan Johar's and the Aditya Chopras have been sitting in AC rooms and watching Switzerland and the NRI culture, and they are seeing such a lavish side of the Indian people that they cannot associate it. There's a world that exists outside them, and that's why perhaps they cannot imagine a Gangs of Wasipur happening, which is true. Which is also another side of reality that exists in our country where both the sides of truth are there. There are people who fall in both the spectrums, but because one is not able to think, they are not able to encourage those kind of stories.
See, films have always been about masala in India.
Yeah.
So and they are no longer about they are still about masala, but only few survive because there is OTT.
Right.
So if Hasin Dilruba is tomorrow opens up in theaters, it will tank badly. No one will go to watch it. No one will pay 250 rupees to go and watch some Pulp Fiction ka overtake that has a bad ending. Apparently, I have not seen the movie, but so even great, like even well written. Maybe apparently Chandu Champion was well written, disappointing movie.
True.
Yeah, but it didn't work. It flopped badly. That's the truth. So it's not about Hindi film industry as it's more the commerce that dictates what is said and what is unsaid. Of course, Hindi writers have been part of Bollywood for a long time. There have been so many writers. You know, there was a film made on Phaneshwar Nath Reno's short story. There have been films made on all kinds of authors. Many of them have been writers. Many of them have been lyricists. So it has a huge Hindi, and many of the lyricists that in those days were also good writers. Tomorrow also, if and that goes to if tomorrow also Raj Shekhar or someone who writes lyrics for films, because I know him personally, I know that he will write a good book if he, you know, and there is a market just because his name is out there, it can sell. So that can happen, but the Hindi world also needs to it needs more readers. Any ecosystem need more readers, and I think the Facebook writers are part of the problem because if you are okay with putting out so much stuff for free, why should the people But also you're not giving them something which is cohesive, something different. A lot of 50% of the articles in my book were published. People didn't need to buy the book, but they bought the book because it's a, as a product, it gives you a, if you read the book, it's a different experience than if you read just a piece. In Hindi, these experiments are seldom, it becomes very writer centric, which is, there's too many Yuva Lekhaks who can't sell books. It's not a good thing in Hindi because some people don't talk about this. If you can't sell books, what will happen to the ecosystem? It needs masala, it needs pulp. Maybe it needs pulp. It needs some very pulpy writing. Malayalam has that. Malayalam has all kinds of writing. So very rich regional.
Amazing writing. Be it literature, be it movies, their stories.
And so what happens is people are reading so much in Malayalam that they also read English, then they read translated works in Malayalam. English books get translated to Malayalam because people are reading there.
Yeah, true.
And in the Hindi heartland, who is reading? Who will read? Yeah, there's so much of. In my city, there is no proper bookshop. There is a Crossword recently, which has opened a few years ago, but it's not very good. It's the only books which sell are competition books. People are not reading anything else. And I read books because I was keen enough to read. So I went to Gandhi Maidan and bought second-hand books. One of the first books I bought was Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things. I couldn't read it back then because I was in class 8th or 9th. And I couldn't understand God of Small Things, but I bought it and later I read it. But if you don't have access to books, you won't read books. Most of the Hindi books which we read, most of the Hindi books are also, if you see poetry collections, for example, poetry collections are actually a very bad representation of a poet because you will find 5, 10 people are not reading it as a poetry collection. They are reading it to read the best poems from the poet, which is not the right way to read it. It is, you are reading craft. You are reading a poet practicing craft. So you have to read all his books. So that culture, commerce, I think commerce more than anything decides what is happening. Hopefully many more Hindi films get made on Hindi authors, by works by Hindi authors, and that would be fabulous, but they would at least make some money.
Yeah.
That more than anything, they will make some money.
Yes.
If they sell their film rights, they can at least make some money. Otherwise, making money from Hindi literature is almost impossible these days. So yeah, I think that can happen in English also. There's immense potential. There are a lot of English books written by contemporary authors, which can be adapted to wonderful films. Only if production houses had more readers. Again, the problem is the ecosystem. The ecosystem props up certain books as the books to be read.
Yeah, true.
And you might not find that great film-worthy book amidst those books to be read.
True.
So yeah, that is also a problem. Let's see what. I was very happy because Jerry Pinto's book got made into a series, and I like the series actually. And it's very good that a person like Jerry's book is getting adapted, for various reasons, because it just increases the diversity of stories on the medium. Yeah,
Yeah, actually, Jerry Pinto's that Murder in Mahem is, I think, what you're
Yeah,
referring to. It was
yeah,
brilliantly made. I loved the sensitivity that they managed to still keep. That's very
yeah. I think Jerry had a role to play in it, but that is a great thing. Yeah, you talk about a murder mystery, LGBTQ issues, everything gets intertwined, and you talk about it sensitively. You don't show people as heroes or villains. You, in that sense, and it's
And
a
even
very
the
good.
new characters which were added for the screen still added a lot to the narrative. It didn't feel
Yeah,
unnecessary kind of dialogues there.
yeah. I think that kind of adaptation is most welcome, and I think again that it's the commerce which will dictate things because if that had been made into a film, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah,
Um, because the Indian audiences are not most of the people who go on Friday nights, Saturday nights to watch a movie. They go because they want a break from their normal lives. So either it has to be very fascinating. They don't want to think about politics. They don't want
true.
to think about identity. They don't want to think about most of the
Very
people
true.
just want entertained.
Very true. So, Abhishek, would you like to talk about the challenges and that you faced while pitching your book, or after it was published, or pitching your articles otherwise, as as a disabled writer in the world of publishing?
Yeah. Pitching my pieces was much harder than pitching my book. I did not get an opportunity to actually pitch my book. I lowered my expectations quite a lot, so
Mhm.
I was ready to be disappointed. I was anyways during this time. During the book time. I was anyways very ill and I was barely able to walk.
Right.
So for me, life had different priorities, but a book was a great thing. But it was, if it hadn't worked, I would have been disappointed, but I would have kept writing because I was anyways producing work and putting it out. That is the most important thing for me as a writer. Whether it turns into a book is a again an important but a different subject. Uh, but pitching pieces was very difficult. I wrote a lot of pieces for free in the beginning, and whenever I pitched, I got one line rejections. Too many one line rejections because I was not pitching about disability. That was the biggest problem, because I hadn't found the voice to write about myself or disability in general. And I didn't sell myself as any identity in particular. So when you write randomly as some person, you are, of course, there is an ecosystem which works
Right.
in our news ecosystem where you don't fit anywhere.
True.
Uh, and when you don't fit anywhere, you don't get accepted. But even publishing self, it's a very funny story about the first piece, which is also in my book, which was later published in Times of India, was about disability, diapers, and dating. So this was a piece I wrote. This was the first very honest piece I wrote, and I thought this was a great piece. So in my excitement, I pitched it to NYT and uh, some fancy medium publication, and everyone rejected it. Uh, of course, I didn't realize that for the Americans who claim diversity, diversity means BIPOC. That means it people who live in America and they have a reference point to it. It doesn't mean that someone living in Patna or writing about disability. That is a later realization. But then I give it to some newspaper who kept kept uh, who made me wait for 1.5 months because it was an evergreen piece. And there were much more relevant pieces like there was International Dog Day. So the nail in the head was there was International Dog Day and there was a piece on dogs that day. And that day, that was the day I lost it, and I said I'm withdrawing my piece. And the reply was, of course, it's an evergreen piece, so you can't complain. But yeah, that was too much. Yeah, for me, you are putting yourself out
Yeah,
in. You are completely. You are exposing yourself. You are being vulnerable, and what you are told is that it's an evergreen piece,
true.
and dogs are much more relevant than your story. But that happened. When that happened, it's a very reputed paper. It's so that completely was a game changer because then I said, "Fuck it, I will just sorry, I'll just put it out." So I created a medium site and posted the piece. And the piece actually got some very interesting people who later wrote uh, commented on my books on my book. Natasha Badwar, Paramita Vora, they've all read my first piece. This was the first piece I had written, and I didn't know them, so they read my piece and they posted it on their social media and all of that. So suddenly, people who were important read the piece, and then someone from Times of India wrote, "Can we republish the piece?" Oh, that then I also tried to republish it, but with people I wrote to, one of them said, one of the very reputed papers said that you have to delete the piece, then we can consider publishing it. I said I'm not deleting it. So that happened, and then another person who tried at another reputed paper said we can't have this piece. Like this is not doesn't fit. Then Times of India came, and then they said you want to republish it, and I said yeah, I could because I knew I also it was not only about publishing, it was something very different. It had never been, I don't think an essay like that is generally published in the Sunday newspaper. So the day it was published, I think I got so many messages by anonymous people who found me and sent me a message that they started their day off crying because of me. But it was a good thing. It was something different. It was something I wanted to, you know, say. But yeah, generally it has been quite, you have to sell yourself a lot, and I'm not the best person for that. And the other thing is you have to have connections which
Yeah,
you need to have in you need to know people, or you need to have a certain ideology which appeals to editors. Like it's a very like take a position. You can't simply say, okay, let me write an analytical piece about this.
mm,
Even if the ideology aligns with them, you might not have the same things to say,
right.
and that is a no-no for them. It's a very I think one of the reasons the politics of this country change for the worse is because of everyone is not ready to leave their own silos. uh, so the writers also are very editors are also very adherent on what they want to publish. Writers are also very adherent on what they want to write. My worldly experience has been very different because I grew up in small towns, and uh, I have I know that real world is quite different from the world that we often try to, you know. I'm a very pragmatic person, political in terms of I'm very very I have deep convictions which I will do anything for, but I'm also very pragmatic when it comes to analyzing a situation. So I wrote a lot of political pieces, but it was mostly for free. And although my most of my political writing was very very accurate, very to the point, no one offered me to write political pieces after that. Even now, people offer me, to write pieces on disability, queerness. Some assume that I'm gay, so write about gayness. So it's a lot like tick boxes I'm filling. Box, tick the box. But yeah, I gave up on that. I gave up on that long time ago. Because anyways, the money never came on time, and so I had to. If I want to earn money, I would rather seek a consultancy assignment in the government sector than try to pitch to people, because pitching to people is hopeless because no matter how good of a writer you are, it's not gone by the pure quality of writing. Let me just say, a lot of pieces I read every day in you read every day in op-eds and columns. They're quite badly written pieces. A lot of pieces are badly written. Your writing is not a parameter for whether it will be published. It's published because whether it's relevant, whether it's appeals to anyone, whether it has some ingrained interest or not. A lot of newspapers carry most of the pieces, op-eds are people see they have some kind of agenda, which is fine. It's not a bad thing to have agenda, but that's the point. There is some bureaucrat writing on something, some politician writing on something. Once I was writing for a newspaper, and on the opinion page, my name was below a famous journalist whom I hate, a very infamous journalist, and he wrote a long piece. Apparently, I don't think he would have written the piece. Someone would have ghostwritten it for him. But that's how it works, But you feel ashamed that you put your insight and mind into it, and some random person, some journalist, famous journalist writing. But that happens a lot. Then I was writing columns for a newspaper, and that relationship broke because then the staff changed. That the paper is no longer published, and also then they had demands of write against this party, that party. I said I can't write like that. Sorry. So yeah, it's a very not just about writing. It's a very it's a very unfulfilling thing at the end. Unless you are very famous and you just want to write, and you can write like a very famous Indian author, Chetan Bhagat. I will name him because he writes so many columns. Like, why have you? He can write on anything.
Yeah.
And so it's good for him, very good for him, great for him. But that's the state of publishing generally in this country. So good for you if you want to become you can't sustain on it. If any young person is thinking that I will make it as a columnist, writer, op-ed, no dude, there's no money. You won't get your money on time. You will have to beg for it sometimes. And unless you become big enough, now I don't have to demand. Now the money comes after 2 to 3 months. But
yeah, true, very true. Abhishek, I remember one of your posts on X about visiting a very popular bookstore, only to find that they were not wheelchair friendly. And after your post, I noticed that the social media posts of that bookstore now specify that they are not wheelchair friendly. So would you like to comment on this incident, specifically about the constant battle one has to be in, for accessibility, inclusivity, for understanding of some of the most basic things?
Nothing changes. That's the main takeaway. Nothing changes despite all you do. No, that bookstore is not in a position to change anything. They have the property. Right. Sadly for them, they became the focus. But the point is, if I start raising a voice against every bookstore I visit, then I will have bad relationship with all the bookstores. As a writer, you have to have good relationship with all the bookstore owners, so you can't call them out again and again. But the fact is that most of the bookshops in this country are inaccessible. Not only for wheelchair people, but even people like me. I don't want to climb stairs to get to a bookstore. It sadly is the case with many bookshops. But yeah, I think it also, but that post also comes with consequences now. That means that that book seller they will never try associate with me again. That is for sure. They will never associate, because what is the point? I anyway said they are inaccessible, so there's no point of me collaborating. But they are also very powerful people in their own city, so they will have lots of connections. So if they are doing an event with someone powerful there, they will never call me.
True.
So calling people out never works. this was the big lesson for me. It doesn't change anything, and you are the person who ends up on the losing side, being an activist.
I
Because
completely agree.
people don't care. People don't care about that.
I have been blocked by two very prominent literary festivals in the country because I simply asked them about their accessibility. And I said this only as an attendee, like I'm not even a guest or a speaker. I
Yeah,
just said that as an attendee. If I want to come, I need to know, right? Whether it is accessible, whether I have I have a specific parking which is available in case I plan to come, whether there are stairs or there is a wheelchair access. You need to tell me all this, and I don't think there's anything wrong if you just specify this when you announce a festival.
yeah, yeah.
I was just completely
I think
blocked.
specifying is good, and it's great that the bookshop, which I question, does that now. It's very good. It's very welcoming of them that they added that, but it doesn't change the world for disabled people.
Yeah, sadly, yes.
And of course, the disabled people have a lot of diversity, so they will choose a different kind of disabled for me. Like, you know, I was called to an interview, and the place was completely inaccessible, but I didn't know that, and I went for the interview and gave the interview. And I said, "Oh, that's why I'm picked, because a wheelchair person on a wheelchair definitely can't make it. So that's why I'm picked, because I can make it." So yeah, they'll just find someone who can walk, and you know, and if they complain about noise, or if they complain about lights, they can find someone who is even less. Now there are degrees of disability which people understand and expert,
Yeah.
only because it can benefit them. People, the festivals do a lot of these days. Tokenistic disability panels are also there. So
Very true.
I it's also like they don't want to change. No one wants to change in this country. It's you can't be the only people who can make it as a disabled person if you are very rich, and if you are have lots of people and support, then it's easy. And there's a problem. In fact, one of the strangest thing is that I don't belong to any of these ecosystem. I'm not rich enough. I don't have the, and I think it also bothers a lot of people, because till now a lot of disabled activists in this country were belong to a certain, they lived in big cities, had a certain, you know class thing going on for them, well traveled people. But yeah, it's like, so yeah, I think, yeah, but that's changing. I think one of my I think I don't want to say it, but I think one of my contributions when I'm gone to disability movement is that I just opened up the space by not belonging and still belonging. And a lot of people followed me, not because of me, but they followed me. But they also came up.
That's a very powerful thing to say.
Yeah.
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 So, Abhishek, this brings us to the last question. I want to know, how do you feel about the representation of disability and literature in media that has evolved so far? And what changes do you believe are still necessary?
I think one of the no one wants again. I want to go back to no one wants to really change.
Yeah.
They want to perform that they have changed, and they will include the easiest disabled person around them and give them the mic. And you know I recently complained that some Hindi news channel was running a ticker saying Surdas ne kiya kamal, and Surdas. So then, yeah, I thought it must be about singing, if even a Surdas. But that guy was not even singing. He was just talking, said a poem. Why is it Surdas? But so all the wokeism is reserved for, uh, see, we are 2 points some percent
True.
official. Maybe we are 4%, but not 4% doesn't assert themselves identity wise. 2%, let's take 2.5%. So we are politically not relevant. So basically, that's the point. if we were politically relevant, then people would have at least the new young gen would have performed it well.
Yeah.
Now no one even performs it. Disability media representation in terms of disability hasn't changed because of two things. One is the need for disabled people to be heroes, which I understand. I don't blame them for it. They have nothing going on anyways. They want to be heroes at least. The second thing is about tokenism. Tokenism and everything.
I was
So
going
these
to
are the
use
two.
that.
Yeah, these are the two things I think, and it goes together. It is a perfect blend. So the point is, inspiration. Inspo works because of two reasons. Because positive stories, the emphasis on positive stories, and disabled people themselves are desperate for attention because they don't want to go and say, ki, "Oh, I'm not getting laid. That's why I feel bad about life." No one. Have you seen anyone saying that or writing that? No. Such a horrible thing.
Yeah.
It's such a common thing for disabled people. Why can't they say that? Why can't they simply say, dude, I'm not getting laid? That's my biggest problem in this life. I'm not inaccessibility and getting laid. Two things, biggest problems for most disabled people. Or they can say, if they're blind, they can say, sighted world is the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Or I'm not able to live peacefully, independently. Maybe that is the problem. But it all filters down to a language, and a language that is very comfortable, that makes able-bodied people very comfortable. Most of the organizations do that job of filtering it to a very comfortable. Why won't they get their funding from corporations. All None of the organizations on disability have FCRA, so they have to depend on Indian corporates for funding. That is the truth, by the way. So they will have to stick to that language. How is corporate language about disability, diversity, the language of diversity? So disability representation in media is basically a DEI project and nothing beyond it. And even if you see people like me writing, it's a DEI project. The day will change when things change is that will only change that when disabled people are able to write on anything. It's not that they have not, they're journalists who are disabled, but then they have to completely hide the disability part. They have to be just journalists. So yeah, I think disability representation will only increase if there are more disabled people working in media houses, more people, more editors who are commissioning pieces,
Yes.
and finding a original voice. India is yet to find a voice, her voice about disability, what she wants to say. You can't say all these wonderful Western uh, things which fit in the Western framework without acknowledging that anywhere you go out and if you are a cripple, if you're a disabled person, then the gaze tells you that you have bad karma. That's why you are disabled. You know, the blame is on the disabled person. That blame has not shifted for centuries and it is not shifting. It doesn't change the fact that you go out and the person sees you. That hasn't changed.
True.
You know, I remember, there's so much pity involved in the entire process of
Yeah.
media interaction. So when you have pity, you will have overcoming. Because when you are looked down as the most pitiable creature on earth, of course, if you do anything, you have achieved something.
Yeah.
That is the problem. I think that will take a long time, and I don't think there is a disability culture built in this country. And most people are also happy with it because why not? You know, No one wants to. People are very in India. People don't want to acknowledge. People have a problem now. They don't want to acknowledge the root cause of things. They don't want to acknowledge,
They have to first
even if
accept that there is a problem. That is where the
yeah,
main issue is. That once they see that,
they can't accept, because if they accept, it becomes very difficult for them. You start questioning the ableist world, and it becomes impossible for you to live with your family, with your society, with everything.
And
Suffocating.
as a reviewer, I noticed a very interesting thing. Like, be it your book or be it Vaishali's book or be it other books where people write about their visible and invisible disabilities and challenges, there are people who have tried finding faults. And it is more got to do with the privileges of, of having certain privileges, and they don't want to see certain things. They want you to not talk about certain things while they want you to focus on certain things. So in this context, no, I liked what Alina said when I had invited, you all were there for that panel in Ananke, that this is my truth. You are associating it with the whole community and making it a part of my identity. I never said that.
That's the biggest tragedy. I am writing a memoir. It's supposed to be my story. Every disabled body is different.
Yes.
Because you want me to be representative of the entire community, so that if needed, you can break me apart and then claim that disability, this is wrong.
Yeah.
I am a unique voice in disability, and I will be a unique voice in disability. Vaishali is a unique voice in disability. So are all the others. People who are writing, who are doing anything. You want to make it formalized because it's easy for you to digest.
True. Very true. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much, Abhishek. It was wonderful talking to you. Do you have any thoughts to share with the viewers or the readers? I'll be sharing all the links to your social media, your book, and everything in the description of this.
Yeah, it was wonderful to talk to you as usual. But also, people should be free. People are free to message me, and I'm not the best person to give writing advice, because I think my best writing advice is just to write, and which most people find very difficult, because it's not an easy thing to just keep writing and not have any goals and to keep writing, because long process. But I think that's the best writing advice I can give. And I think just people, and despite the system, if writing brings you joy, then write. If writing is the thing which brings you joy, if it makes you heal, then write. That is the only purpose of writing. That is the primary purpose of writing. Leave the system, leave the publishers, leave the ecosystems alone. That's right. Yeah, that's
I'm going to take this advice for myself also and get back to writing soon. Thank you so much, Abhishek.
Okay. Take care.
You too. Thanks.